Bedford Forrest was born to a poor blacksmith family in Tennessee in 1821. The moment he hit adulthood, Forrest abandoned his family legacy and became a plantation owner, real estate speculator, gambler, and slave trader. When the Civil War came, he was exempted from conscription due to his wealth and status as a planter, but he joined the Army anyway. In October 1861, just months after completing his training, he used his personal wealth to buy new arms, horses, and supplies for his whole division. This got the attention of his higher-ups, and they promoted him to lieutenant colonel and granted him command of his own mounted division. His command of the 3rd Tennessee Cavalry is what gave him the opportunity to make history. Even with his marginal education, he developed and executed revolutionary tactics akin to today's total warfare or guerrilla warfare strategies. This earned him the nicknames the Wizard of the Saddle to the Confederate States and the Devil Forrest to the Union States. His new tactics were so innovative at the time that they were even written into the Confederate soldiers' field manuals. Radical ideas such as ransacking enemy supply lines instead of just dynamiting them, or using horses to carry large numbers of troops around to flank the enemy, won the Confederacy many battles in the Civil War. Nathan Forrest's revolutionary tactics modernized the old tactics and adapted them to the new technologies of the Civil War era. Were it not for his developments, generals would have still been marching lines and lines of soldiers directly into Gatling gunfire by the end of the Civil War. These tactics opened up new strategies and ideas to commanders and led to the saving of hundreds of lives at the expense of thousands of others.
Felix Frankfurter was born on November 15, 1882 in Vienna, Austria. He and his family moved to New York City in 1894 when he was 12 years old. From then on, he attended elementary school through high school in New York. From an early age, Felix was interested in politics, attending various political lectures centered around trade unionism, socialism, and communism. After finishing college, Felix applied successfully to Harvard Law School. Frankfurter began his legal career when he joined the team at the New York law firm of Hornblower, Byrne, Miller, and Potter in 1906. At the law firm, he became the assistant of Henry Stimson and quickly began supporting New Nationalism and President Teddy Roosevelt. While associated with the government, Frankfurter demonstrated progressive ideals and showed his support for the Bull Moose campaign. Frankfurter became advisor to FDR in 1939 and was appointed Supreme Court Justice by Roosevelt. As Justice, he served for over 23 years and helped in the founding of the American Civil Liberties Union. By doing this, he showed his support for the LGBTQ community, as well as his support against the death penalty and for abortion rights. Frankfurter served on many important court cases, the most important one being the Brown v. Board of Education, where he ruled in favor of the integration of American schools. Frankfurter played a key role in the civil rights movement and the push for equal education rights. Although these movements would have happened regardless, Frankfurter used his position in the Supreme Court to further the causes.
Henry Morgenthau Jr. was born into a prominent Jewish family in 1891. Morgenthau was highly educated, graduating from college with a double major in agriculture and architecture. His political career began when he was working at Fishkill Farms, which bordered the Roosevelt residence who he befriended in 1913. He then entered the political scene in the early 1900s when he was elected as the governor of New York City. After FDR was elected president in 1933, he promoted Morgenthau Jr. as the governor of the Federal Farm Board, where he stayed for a year until appointed as Secretary of the Treasury in 1934. Morgenthau Jr. is considered one of the most influential cabinet members due to his activity as Secretary of the Treasury. Under Roosevelt, he successfully implemented many plans that affected the United States' domestic and political spheres. Some lesser-known but notable successes include his campaign against corruption, where Morgenthau created a new investigative agency which triumphantly prosecuted mob boss Al Capone, political boss Big Tom Pendergast, and mafia king Charles Carollo. Aside from his domestic additions, Morgenthau's greatest achievements lie in his contributions to Roosevelt's political policies. Henry was a big believer in the New Deal and the 3 R's within its platform. In turn, he strongly supported and sought to fund many of Roosevelt's programs, such as the Works Progress Administration, the Public Works Administration, and the Civilian Conservation Corps. Morgenthau Jr. also highly promoted and contributed to the Social Security program, which he helped give the federal budget more leeway in its spending. In the end, it was Morgenthau's re-implementation of the war bond system that defined his legacy. The execution of the war bond allowed the government to fund the war effort, retirement, salaries, and most importantly, public works programs. Without Morgenthau's management of the federal budget, Roosevelt would have had to continue his trend in deficit spending. If that did occur, the federal debt would have grown faster and faster. However, the public works would have stimulated the economy, eventually sparking the end of the Great Depression, and an increase in global production at the expense of the federal budget.
Lucy Burns was born July 28, 1879, in Brooklyn, New York. She attended school all throughout her life, wanting to first become a teacher. She attended Columbia University, Vassar University, and Yale University. She began teaching at Erasmus High School and taught for 2 years. She quickly realized this wasn't what she wanted to do, so she moved to Europe to travel and go back to school, attending various universities in Germany and England. Burns entered the suffrage movement when she met Emmeline Pankhurst, an English women's activist. She stayed in England and joined the Women's Social and Political Union. From 1910 to 1912, she traveled around Europe, giving many speeches on street corners, pushing for more people to join the movement. After being apprehended, she met Alice Paul at a London police station where they bonded over their suffrage experiences. In 1912, she moved back to the U.S. and joined the National American Women's Suffrage Association. While with this organization, she helped organize various parades and unions, most notably being the suffrage parade in front of the White House during Wilson's inauguration. She also combined forces with Alice Paul to create the Congressional Union, originally as a part of the NAWSA, but later splitting into its own organization. Paul and Burns went state to state with their organization, trying to persuade more people to join the suffrage movement. Burns, while with the Congressional Union, was the first woman to speak in front of Congress. Without Burns' activism, the women's suffrage movement might not have had the surge it did in the early 1900s. Her work with Alice Paul was big in the push for equal rights for women. Most people remember Alice Paul when they think of the women's suffrage movement, but Burns was just as important to the movement as Paul.
Ted Kennedy, brother to President John F. Kennedy, was born exactly 200 years after George Washington on February 22, 1932. He was poorly educated, but he barely managed to make it into Harvard and aimed to become a lawyer. During his second semester there, he was caught cheating and was expelled. He was told he could reapply if he demonstrated good behavior. He enlisted in and quickly served 2 years in the military. He was discharged as a private first class and then reapplied to Harvard. He was accepted and later admitted to the Massachusetts bar as a lawyer at the age of 27. His brother then shortly announced his campaign for presidency. Ted entered the political scene by helping his brother campaign for the President of the United States, and with his brother's victory, earned himself a good reputation. His brother, now the president, asked him to fill the now vacated position in the Senate, previously held by JFK himself. A year later, Ted took up that position and began one of the longest terms as senator ever. A year into his new position, JFK was assassinated, and another year later, Ted himself fell victim to a plane crash. This crash left him with a punctured lung, broken ribs, and back injury that led to chronic back pain. This incident, and the months in the hospital that followed, brought his interest to the shortcomings of America's healthcare system, and he began thinking of how to improve it. He started by proposing a national healthcare plan, which would eventually become reality under Nixon and later Obama. When he returned to the Senate, he made significant contributions to the Voting Rights Act of 1965 and the Immigration and Nationality Act of 1965. Kennedy also spent time campaigning support for the Vietnam War, reforming healthcare under Nixon, humanizing the draft, and eventually challenged Jimmy Carter for the Democratic nomination for president. Ted didn't get the Democratic Convention's nomination, and with that, his political career began to decline. He did not have much trouble winning re-election to the Senate when it came up, but his new contributions were minimal after his loss of nomination. He endorsed Al Gore and Barack Obama and supported other Democratic causes before his death in 2009 due to a brain tumor. Ted Kennedy's plane crash and subsequent push for national healthcare has, in the end, likely saved tens of thousands of lives. He brought national healthcare to the foreground of political debate enough to get the Nixon administration's attention, which then catapulted the issue to a debate on national level. Today, we still see this debate going on with the controversy over Obamacare, and if it wasn't for Ted Kennedy, national healthcare would be a lot less of an issue.